speak a look of it. Hi, everybody. It's Katie Harris, owner and CEO of NursePreneurs, and I am here today with Doctors for Providers. It's Dr. Dan Cousin and Dr. Lev Grinman. Thanks so much for being here with us today, guys.
Our pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Katie.
Awesome. So we're really excited about this because this is a huge part of nursing businesses. Obviously not all nurse businesses need a medical director or a collaborating physician, but a lot of them do, and it can be the life or death of a business getting started. So a lot of our nurses are very anxious about this topic. So we're really excited. Just for anybody that's out there, I see a lot of people jumping on right now. If you have questions, please post them. We're going to go through all your questions. I promise we'll get to them, but post them into the chat box. And, while you guys are doing that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Lev and Dr. Dan. Can you guys give us an overview of what Doctors for Providers is and how you got started?
Sure. So Doctors for Providers is a company that matches registered nurses, nurse practitioners, and physician assistants with collaborating physicians, supervising physicians, or medical directors, whatever that need may be. I personally got the idea of starting the company when I had done several collaborations throughout my career with different types of advanced level providers. And I thought that it would be a great business because there's really a very large need for providers out there. They're sort of out in the cold when it comes to finding a physician. Physicians are often busy. They may not understand what needs to be done. And I thought that, hey, let's help these guys. And it's been extremely rewarding. We've worked with many people and really enjoying the ride. Dan has many years experience in doing medical legal recruiting and has been a close friend for a number of years. And so we went into business together to do this because of his prior experience, because we both believed in this mission. We think that there is looking at the trends in healthcare, there's going to be a significant shortage in healthcare providers in different parts of the country. There's just not enough of everybody to go around. So it's very important to get advanced level providers into a position where they can take control of their careers and be able to start their own business and help people who really need it. And so that's kind of the background of why we started what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I would just tag along to what Lev just said. He pretty much said it all. It's really a noble pursuit that all of you are doing, even by just being on this educational, informative session, because it's really the future of medicine in many ways. It allows care to be brought to places where otherwise it's tough to get care because there's not enough physicians to go around, and there's by being on the front line, the advanced practice providers are able to reach further with the help of the collaborative physicians. So we really commend you and everyone on their entrepreneurial pursuits and ambitions.
Yeah, and it's really awesome to have you guys too, because this is something, especially for like our IV hydration or when we were doing med spa. We were like on Indeed looking for a medical director for a lot of the nurses and stuff. And it was so frustrating because we got all kinds of crazy responses. And we got like people that wanted $5,000 a month or 55% equity in the business, or, it was just all over the map. So how do you guys deal with that?
So what we've done is we've been very proactive in establishing a large database of physicians who are knowledgeable about being supervisors, collaborators, medical directors, and also screening those doctors to make sure that, one, they understand what the financials are of a new business, that this is not something where you can go in and expect to ask for a percentage of the take. We only work with doctors who, in many cases, Dan, for example, has established a very large, has very long relationships with physicians who have very advanced training at very good institutions and really enjoy the teaching component of being a collaborator. So we want doctors who are educators who are willing to listen, who we also screen them for their medical malpractice history to make sure that there's no hidden dangers in trying to put somebody onto your malpractice insurance if that needs to be the case. So we screen and talk to our doctors all the time to make sure that they understand what they're doing. We like using doctors who've had experience in collaborating or being medical directors in the past. And so it's usually a very seamless transition in putting somebody or offering somebody up for, to be that collaborator.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really important to have doctors who are in it for the right reason, because doctors, like any specialty, is a slice of life. Just like you don't want to get married to the wrong person. I mean, matchmaking is so important, and the fundamentals of business. I think I never went to business school, but I sort of learned the trial and error. The 5 P's of business. The product, this and that, but the most important P is people. So if you don't have good people, then your business, whatever it is, whether you're selling pharmaceutical drugs or you're selling lemonade on the street, whatever it is, in this case, we're trying to provide care. It's just destined to failure from the start if you don't have good people. So that's why it's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And that relationship goes, both sides. Like, sometimes it's just not a good match, and sometimes the relationship breaks up. But in this case, if it's in a business, right, like that, the nurse in particular, that business shuts down, and that's like one of the biggest fears. Yep. So I know you guys have a large database of physicians. So could you talk about that and what happens if, it doesn't necessarily have to go sour. Maybe the physician or the nurse, something just doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a very good point. And this is one of the biggest advantages of working with us. And it's a situation we have run into a few times. Obviously, we never want to see a situation where a doctor can't do the collaboration for some reason, has to leave, or there's an issue in the relationship between the doctor and the provider. We essentially guarantee that we will find a replacement, and we try to do it very quickly. We actually had, as an example, we had something come up this week where the provider and the physician were not able to work with each other. And within 2 days, we had a replacement. We have a Zoom call, actually, I think today or tomorrow, with the new physician, and I think it's going to work out great. So we understand that these things can happen, and that's why we are there to find a replacement physician at any time if the need arises.
If only marriages worked like that, right? There's no divorce attorneys involved with this.
Yeah, I've heard about like 5-year contracts that you can have with a marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So, and what are the directors, the medical directors or collaborating physicians? What term do you like better? Like, and what's the difference, I guess?
I guess the difference really is, I guess part of it is sort of a legal definition. I think a collaborating physician and a supervising physician are very similar. A supervising physician is a term that some states like to use. And I think part of it depends on how many chart reviews they have to do, how much oversight they have to have over the decision-making of the provider. Medical directors, I find that sometimes that term is used more effectively for facilities such as spas and clinics, where the physician doesn't necessarily can't have a legal collaborating relationship with say a registered nurse, but can have that relationship with a facility. So it all depends. It's sort of legality. I kind of see it as sort of one. In many ways, it's kind of the same. I don't think it really matters what term you use, as long as it's a clearly defined relationship that's in writing and there's an understanding between both sides of what needs to be done, how often they need to follow up with each other, how comfortable they are with each other. So it's sort of semantics in some ways.
Okay. And for those of you that are just joining us, we're talking to Doctors for Providers, and we have Dr. Lev Grinman and Dr. Dan Cousin on with us. And you can certainly type in some of your questions in the chat box. I do have one. We have a lot of state-specific questions, which you may or may not be able to answer. But one question, kind of piggybacking on that, has to do with like what the medical director, collaborating physician has to do. Do they need to be on site? Do they need to see a certain number of charts? Do they need to see every patient? Maybe talk us through some of that. And does it depend?
And I think it really does depend on different states. And I wish I had a photographic memory, but I don't. A lot of it is state dependent. And it usually takes us, if we have to do this research, it usually takes us only a couple hours to get back to you. We have stuff written down. We have files of different state requirements for different types of relationships. It really depends. Sometimes it's there may not be any chart review requirements. Some physicians prefer to do at least 5 or 10%. In some states, there is a 10% requirement. Some of it depends on the training and the experience that the provider or the advanced level provider has. If they have X number of hours of practice, then sometimes those requirements become more lax as time goes on. State requirements also change all the time. Recently, there was a change in Florida as to how many PAs one physician can supervise at a time. So it's a constantly evolving topic. Also, different states have different requirements. It's becoming less and less common that a physician has to go on site. And that's partly how we started the company, with the idea that, a lot of these are going to be remote collaborations. However, for different reasons, the physician may go on site anyway. It may be a practice request, and if the physician is okay with that, they will go on site. So we will do whatever it takes. There may be a mileage requirement. In some states, you have to be within 75 miles of the clinic if you're a physician. So there's no one answer for everybody. It really depends on the location.
Okay, so if somebody has that specific question, they would have to get in contact with your group, and that would be something that you hash out before you start searching. So
sometimes it's easy. It's as easy as just calling the board of whatever board you belong to and asking what the requirements are. Also, during COVID, there are, for example, recently we were dealing in a state somewhere in the Midwest where there's usually an on-site requirement when you first start your practice with the physician, but we just found out that because of COVID, if you start your collaboration before the end of August, that requirement is waived. And so, yes, usually we recommend talking to us, asking us if we know. If we don't know, we can contact the states, or we can do it jointly with the provider. So we always figure it out, though.
Yeah, that was the most overwhelming thing, because, a couple of years ago, we had considered doing something like this because it was such a huge need in our community. And I quickly became very overwhelmed with all the different requirements and the evolving changes and all that kind of good stuff.
Absolutely. And sometimes we have to reach out to the real experts, which is the attorneys. And sometimes we ask them, like, hey, what are you guys aware of or not aware of? And, if we really run into a roadblock. So there's always a way to find the answer. We've been able to get an answer.
So this user, and I don't get names on this unless they're signed into Facebook, so I apologize for calling Facebook user, but he or she says, does the provider have to be on site in Texas for an RN-owned small salon for Botox and fillers only?
I actually would have to double check. I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head.
But in general, like, there's situations where the physician does not need to be on site.
Most of the time, the answer is no, they do not. I know that in Texas, at least for physician associates and for nurse practitioners, physicians do not have to be on site. For registered nurses, I would have to double check. But I know a lot of times, most of the time, they do not need to be on site. But again, it is specific to the degree that you have and the type of practice that you run.
And to that end too, because we have a lot of people that contact us, and this is particularly for IV hydration, and they'll be licensed practical nurses, LPNs, LVNs. I've had phlebotomists, paramedics, and they all want to do IV hydration. What is kind of your, practice with those type of people doing IV hydration and connecting with a medical director, just so that we have we can direct people properly?
I mean, again, certainly we're happy to work. We can work with registered nurses. when it comes to, phlebotomists or paramedics, it really, again, I think sometimes you have to do a little bit more digging. So even though somebody can draw blood at one time, it doesn't necessarily mean that the state allows them to actually hang an IV. So that's the clarification that, and sometimes we recommend, if there really is ambiguity, we do recommend that somebody, in real scenarios where it's really, really not clear, it never hurts to ask a lawyer. Either side can do that. I know there's a cost associated with speaking to attorneys, but sometimes that's what it takes. And we have had providers say, look, I use my lawyer for my contract. I use him for this, I use him for that. And yes, I'm going to check with them just to make sure that this is completely legit. Yeah.
And also the physicians, the onus is also largely on them to know the rules of their own state. And most of them do. So altogether, with the three parts of the triangle, we definitely can get to the answer. And then the healthcare attorneys come in as needed.
Yes. And we have physicians that we work with closely who have their own attorneys who've helped them do collaborations, contracts for many years. And sometimes we rely on them as well and say, hey, what's your experience been in this state? This state is new, this type of collaboration is new for us, but we know you've done this in the past. What does your attorney say? What's the latest on that? And sometimes that's a good source of information also.
Okay, so I have a question here from Maria, and I might need clarification on this, Maria, but it says, can I get a medical director and nurse practitioner contract for the state of California? And California is one of those wonky states, I'll just say it, that, it's been very difficult for nurses to own businesses. Do you have any thoughts on the state of California?
Yeah. I know New York is a state, California is a state like that. New York isn't in a way a state like that. I think in New York, it's a little bit easier for nurse practitioners, but it's a problem for PAs. So in certain corporate practice of medicine states, or, for whatever reason, or states like California, where it's even more strict, a physician has to own at least 51% of the practice, say in California. So we've had instances where we've helped to set up physicians with nurse practitioners to facilitate that ownership. And we work more as consultants in those instances, but we can facilitate that. We had a contract recently where we did that. So it is more challenging, but we do look for physicians who are willing, who understand that type of relationship where it's a little bit more complicated, and can certainly assist with that as well.
I know that, Lev said he doesn't have photographic memory, even though he's pretty much as close to it as you can get. But there's so many different individual types of situations in all the different states. We would just encourage you just to go to the Doctors for Providers website, or this one that's here. Since we're affiliated, and just question by question, we'll just knock it out and help cater to each particular inquiry.
Awesome. And then let's see, so Ellie Wood says, what about medical directors for assisted living facilities? I'm not quite sure the whole breadth of that question. If you want to ask something more specific, I can imagine you certainly would provide medical directors for.
Yeah, I don't think it'd be an issue, just as, we can provide medical directors for people who do telemedicine in person, whether it's in a patient's home or in an assisted facility. If it requires a medical director and oversight, we can certainly find somebody.
Okay, so we have two nurses from Louisiana. We have Blasia and Layla, and they're both asking a question that's kind of, so I'm going to ask it together, but it says, if I'm in Louisiana, you link me to a collaborating physician who is also in Louisiana, and then will all the nurses in Louisiana have the same collaborating MD, and how many can the doctor have at one time?
I know we just did a Louisiana collaboration this week. I think, yes, different states have different numbers of providers that a physician can carry at one time. I can't remember if it's 4 or 6 in Louisiana, but I also know that sometimes if you work part-time, your collaboration can count as a partial person, or as a partial, a quarter or half of one. So it's up to the physician to keep track of how many people they're following, and make sure that they're not overdoing. I think it's 6 in Louisiana, now that I think about it. And so it's also, sometimes we do also have, I do want to mention that some of our physicians are multi-state licensed, and that depending on what the state requirements are, the physician doesn't always have to be within that state. And so I know that this one particular contract that we have in Louisiana, the physician is actually based in Louisiana, but it doesn't always have to be the case. And it's not a problem if everything can be done remotely.
Okay, I have, let's see. So this one says, hello, I'm a new entrepreneur and unsure how to approach a doctor who will work with me as a medical director for IV hydration. What approach works for you? And would you be willing to work with someone small and new?
Well, we always work, most of our clients are small and new and they're just starting out. So just approach us, ask us to find you somebody. Let's talk about your budget and we will, we will find you somebody. That's what we do.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue into your process. So let's say, and for everybody here, we're talking to Doctors for Providers, and I've laid all this out at nursepreneurs.com/medical-director. But what happens, so somebody goes there, they click on the link, they fill out a form, and then what happens?
Yeah, so usually within a half hour, we pride ourselves on good customer service. Usually.
Oops, I think, Lev, you might have disconnected your audio.
I think I'm back.
I know what you're going to say. I was going to complete your sentence.
Yeah, I said usually within an hour or less, somebody will get to you as soon as we receive your questionnaire. And the questionnaire just goes through basic questions about your practice, what you plan to do, your budget, what kind of physician you're looking for, your background, what your degree is. And so based on that, somebody will talk to you. We have 5 people who do this full time. Matching providers with physicians. They will speak to you further for as long as it takes to figure out what your needs are. And then the next step would be to, find the best physician that matches that collaboration. That process usually takes no more than a couple of days, unless it's a very tricky requirement. The physician's redacted CV will be emailed to the provider. If the provider thinks that the CV is good and they want to talk to this doctor, we'll set up a Zoom call that can last up to an hour, where you can meet each other and answer each other's questions and see if this collaboration is something that you want to pursue. And then we will go ahead, try to set up ensure that everything starts on time and take it from there. So I guess that's sort of the gist of it, is talking to you a couple of times, sending you the appropriate CVs, setting up an actual video call to meet the physician. And then we will also follow up intermittently during your collaboration to make sure everything is going well and make sure that the doctor is meeting your needs.
Okay, and so what is, how much does something like this cost, and what is the cost of the collaborating physician? So
the cost of the collaborating physician really varies depending on what the needs are. And again, we talked about some of these. So the variables could be, does the physician actually have to go on site? How many charts does the physician have to review? What specialty does the physician have to be? In certain instances, the physicians have to be, say, dermatologists or plastic surgeons. Those are harder to find. Those are folks who are very busy and have very high budgets for when they do try to do collaborative work. For basic collaborations, our fees can start as low as about $750 a month. And go up from there. And again, it really depends on what your needs are. And we obviously try to work with everybody to be within their budget. We're cognizant of the fact that a lot of folks are just starting their own practices, may not have a large cash flow. We occasionally offer discounts for the first 3 or 6 months, and we try to work with you.
And what about your process for matchmaking?
The matchmaking, currently, we're running a promotion where we do not charge for the actual matchmaking. Maybe that'll change in the future. We do not want to make that a prohibitive cost of trying to find you somebody. We understand that if you're looking for somebody, you're on a tight budget, you really want to find that person. And we're okay with that. We're okay with taking our time, making sure everything is correct. So as of right now, we're not going to be charging for any matchmaking itself.
All right. So the process would be, I mean, they can go to your website, doctorsforproviders.com, or, to facilitate things, nursepreneurs.com/medical-director. And in both places, you'll find a form which lead you to the same place. And you fill out that form. There's only like 8 or 10 questions. They're pretty simple to answer. And then they meet with your group. And there's no exchange of money until you find the collaborating physician that you're going to hire for your practice. And then do you pay that person directly, or how does that work?
The payments go through Doctors for Providers. We sort of act as an agent for the physician, and both sides sign contracts to that effect. Most of our contracts are 3 months. So the contract is for a year. However, there's an out if something goes wrong, and payments are taken quarterly. So we'll bill for the first 3 months and 3 months after that.
Okay. All right. So Shona says, my question is about collaboration for mobile COVID testing in Texas, and what are some of the lab testing limitations for pre-IV hydration? I don't know if you can answer that or not.
Don't know if I can answer the actual medical part of it.
Yeah. So Dr. Lev and Dr. Dan are fixing you up with the doctors that know the answer to specific questions about IV hydration or Botox. Oops, I lost my place. Here's a question. What if a provider needs a specific specialty in their collaborating physician? Do certain specialties drive a different rate?
Yes, absolutely they do. As I said, some specialties such as dermatology, plastic surgery, and say orthopedic surgery may certainly be a little bit more expensive. So we really try to, sometimes how we get around this is that, so for example, if somebody's trying to start an aesthetics practice, in some states, it doesn't have to be a certain type of specialty that matches up with you. So if we have physicians who are very knowledgeable about aesthetics, it may not be dermatologists or plastic surgeons, but do a lot of aesthetics in their daily lives, we can set you up with those. And sometimes the budgets can be much more reasonable.
Okay. And I'm getting educated today on MSO, MSA, because I never heard of this before, and I've had about 10 people ask me about this. So if I'm able to work with you, do I need to have my attorney draw up documents first regarding MSO, MSA, and hopefully
no,
that means.
So MSO is like a management services agreement, or MSA is a management services agreement, and that's something you will need in states like New York or California, where you have a business that cannot own the medical practice, but can only work for the medical practice and collect fees. In that instance, you have to have a third party, like a management company, essentially. In most instances, that's not an issue. Again, unless you are in one of those states, it's not an issue. And if you run a practice, you do not need an MSA. Our contract that we will draft will cover all those points. Those contracts are usually with the practice itself. It doesn't have to be with the provider. There will have to be a direct contract between the nurse or the nurse practitioner and the physician, if it's a true collaboration, because that is called practice of medicine. And when it's practice of medicine, it has to be directly with the two parties that are working together. And that's separate. But again, that does not involve any sort of MSA. Okay.
But I guess the end all of that is that you can help facilitate.
We can definitely help facilitate, yes.
Okay. I would have to re-listen to this because I'm not sure I caught all that. But all right. So let's see. Another person says, I don't, and I'm not quite sure why they would say this, but I don't specifically want one medical director. I want multiple collaborating physicians for my infusion clinic. Is that something, is that reasonable? Is that something normal or?
Absolutely. So the reasons could be, one, there could be multiple providers that are under the same clinic, and I guess it could be for for other reasons. We have, for example, a provider that wanted to have 2 different doctors, and it's not common that people ask for multiple physicians for budgetary reasons or other reasons. I think that if you have a physician who is readily available, I think that all you need is one. However, having said that, some states do require a backup. In case a physician goes on vacation, there needs to be somebody on the contract as a backup physician for the collaboration. So we can set that up as well. But again, for us, the more the merrier. That's okay. We'll set you up with multiple providers. We can sometimes offer a small discount for additional physicians that come to work with you. So we can, if you need multiple physicians, we can work with you on that. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then Pennsylvania is one of those states in particular that, as a nurse practitioner, I needed a physician on my license and then a backup physician as well.
Yeah, and we can definitely set that up. That's not a big deal.
Okay. And then Andrea says, just to confirm, should we wait to contact you until we're about 4 weeks out from starting the IV hydration business? Do you want them early in the process, later in the process? Where do you want them?
That's actually a very good question. So the way we work is the only other fee that we haven't spoken about is if you contact us fairly early on in your process and you want to make sure that you're a very organized person and you want to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row and you want to get set up with a physician but you're not yet ready to open your doors, we can match you up with somebody, and then there's a simple $300 a month hold fee. So say if somebody contacts us in July but their clinic's not going to open till November, we will set you up with a physician and the contracts will be ready to go. We will charge you a $300 fee every month until your clinic opens, to make sure that that physician is secured to work with you. But really, it never hurts to start early. There could be a lot of different obstacles along the way. Depending on whether or not you're going to be accepting insurance, depending on what you're doing, if there's any credentialing that needs to be done, things tend to move slower than you anticipate when you first start a practice. So it doesn't hurt to start more than 4 weeks out.
Okay. Yeah. And actually that's a good one because, and especially the holding fee, because a lot of these, in particular IV hydration, they can't order supplies, and even med spa, they can't order supplies unless there's a physician that's on their vendor. Okay, so that is good to know. We will update that they can contact you. And I guess ideal, would you say between 4 and 6 weeks if they're 4 to 6 weeks out? Or
I would say no less than 4 weeks. I think 4 to 6 weeks sounds about ideal. Again, we could probably, in most instances, find somebody for you within a week and even get a Zoom call set up in that time. So we can work as quickly as you want us to, but 4 to 6 weeks is probably a sweet spot.
Okay. And then I have somebody asking about part-time. So a lot of the nurses are doing this kind of as a side hustle.
Yep.
So what is your thought process on the full price for the month? And does it depend on volume as well?
It usually, unfortunately we are constrained. We can't go so low that we essentially can't pay our physicians. The way we like to look at it is, even if it's a part-time relationship, if the physician still is using their medical license and their time to help you, and so their exposure is still there. And so even though your budget may not be as high, we still have to look at it from that perspective and the doctor's perspective. And so we definitely try to work with you on budget if you're doing it part-time. Of course, there are going to be some limitations. We can't do it for infinitely low budgets, but we try as hard as we can.
Right.
You can also kind of
motivate you to move forward.
Yeah.
When you only have a few patients a day, you could maybe ask your landlord to only pay $12 or something for the month.
Yeah.
The other advantage of, so for example, if you're a somebody that needs medical malpractice coverage, if you're working part-time, you can get a part-time coverage that may be a fraction of what a full-time coverage is. So those are things you also have to consider and can sometimes save you money.
Okay, on the flip side of that then, so is there a certain volume where the pricing changes? Let's say you have a super busy clinic, and do they ever need multiple medical directors because, let's say, their clinic's so big?
I guess that's a possibility that they need multiple medical directors. Certainly, we look at it, we leave it open-ended over a period of time. If, say, your practice is ramping up and the physician's time that they have to devote to supervising you goes up, and if they are constantly reviewing 10% of charts, and that goes from 1 chart to 2 charts to 30 charts, certainly we need to account for that. So over time, if both sides are in agreement that there's more work involved in the physician's end, the pricing will go up some. It's not going to be, we're trying not to make it exorbitant. We're not trying to trap somebody for a low price to start with and then really hike the prices up. It really is something that we look at over a period of time. We're really trying not to go up too high. But again, if the work requirement goes up, then everybody should be paid for what they're doing.
I don't think it would be necessarily a proportional thing. It's more of a token of appreciation type of thing. I mean, if your volume is like, tripling, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be paying triple for the collaborating physician. You might just say, we really appreciate it. Here's a few, you maybe have some extra steak dinners this month. But
yeah.
Well, I would say it's a good problem to have anyway.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have. Exactly.
Yeah, we typically don't want our doctors to look at it. Well, they're making this much money, so I should be making this much money. It's really more, yes, it's a token of appreciation, really, and for their time. So that's how I look at it.
Okay. And how difficult would it be for a certified nurse midwife to start a Botox, filler, laser, hair removal, IV hydration in Florida? Although we're licensed advanced practice, is it easier for family nurse practitioners? And you may or may not have that.
I don't know for sure. I'd have to look. This is the first time I'm hearing of a midwife wanting to do something like this, so I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, they can get involved in like the mommy makeovers, right? Okay, how is pricing typically structured with the physician? Is it fee-based, based on patient volume, time-based?
So we sort of covered that. I guess it partly depends on how much time the physician is going to be spending, how many charts they have to review, whether or not they have to travel on site. So there's a couple of different variables involved. So it's like there's no one set answer for that.
Okay. And Jennifer asked, it's kind of the same, and I think I can answer this, but she lives in Ohio and wanted to see if physicians would contract on an as-needed basis, and I think you answered that. So no, it's a monthly fee that you pay whether you don't use them or you do use them, and to a certain volume. Yeah. So. And then there's that holding fee as well first. So especially with the nurses that are running IV hydration or med spa, and you have to order supplies before you actually launch. And you need that physician license on the vendors, in their files and before you can actually order anything.
Right. So either it'll be a holding fee or it'll be a reduced. If they're actually using the physician's license for something, what we actually prefer to do, we do like to get the doctor paid somewhat if their license is being used, but we'll do definitely a very discounted rate for the first couple of months, sort of bare bones, just to make sure that everybody's paid appropriately. Okay,
so Tamara's an LPN and she's in Michigan and she's an NP willing to work with me at her business. We'll have body contouring and wellnesses. Do you know if I need a medical director? So I guess, what is the thought process there? So there's a lot of states that have independent NP practice. Are they able to serve as medical directors, or are medical directors?
We'd have to double check the requirements for that particular state. In some states, NPs are completely independent and do not require, I don't remember off the top of my head about Michigan. So we'd have to check. But if Michigan requires a collaborator or a supervisor, we can provide one.
Okay. And I'm assuming you have, I know you said you had like 1,000 physicians on your database. You're in all 50 states?
We are. We have physicians in all 50 states, including the very difficult Hawaii and Alaska.
Okay.
And Puerto Rico and other places.
But but if we need to
Puerto Rico, really?
Puerto Rico too, yes.
See.
Virgin Islands?
Maybe. That I'm not 100% sure, actually, but I'm sure we can.
Yeah. Work. Do I hear a work trip coming up?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, actually, we're looking to partner with some nurses in Australia, too, so maybe you want to look into that.
Yeah, that's a good one.
All right. So let's see. I'm not quite sure what these initials are. Maybe you guys do. And I'm an LPC LADC. Do you know what that is?
I do not.
Okay. Well, anyway, looking for doctors willing to...
licensed professional counselor, maybe, actually.
Looking for doctors willing to volunteer to give NAD IV neuro recovery. Yeah, I'm not sure this is the right place. All right, let's move on. So clarifying my previous question, I do have an MD and nurse practitioner willing to work with me as employees, not as a shareholder. I just need to have a proper contract that fits in the state of California. So that would be an attorney question, I would imagine.
That would be an attorney question. And again, if that's all that's required, we can certainly set it up that way. And if they're a 1099 contractor, it could be structured directly. Payments could be structured directly through us.
Right. Yeah, but I would say, Maria, because you already have your MD and NP set up, what you really need is an attorney to get it all into place. Okay, who pays for malpractice insurance?
That's a very good question. So in some instances, we do have physicians who do collaborations across the country and have actually bought their own malpractice insurance that covers them for collaborative work. That is the ideal situation. Many times, the physician does ask that the provider add them to their policy. Most often, it's not a big expense. And if it is, we have resources or brokers that we work with that are very familiar with this type of collaborative setup and can give you better quotes if necessary. But again, it's usually not a big expense if you have to add the physician to your policy. We also are screening our physicians for history of malpractice insurance, payouts, or any issues where it may increase your costs. So we try not to offer physicians that may have significant problems on their license.
Okay,
that makes it cheaper. And the other thing I would say, just for anyone starting off their practice, is when you're talking to your agent, you might want to ask for a part-time first-year policy if your volume is not there yet, because it actually makes it less expensive, because it's kind of prorated based on volume and risk.
Okay. Awesome. All right, guys. So those of you that are just joining, we're here with Dr. Lev Grinman and Dr. Dan Cousin from Doctors for Providers, and they are helping nurses, nurse practitioners, physician assistants to start your business, because if you need a medical director, you need these guys. So if you can go to nursepreneurs.com/medical-director, or you can go straight to doctorsforproviders.com. And this, for now, is a free matchmaking service. They will set you up with a medical director. They can get you set up in as little as a week, but if you're anticipating starting your practice 4 to 6 weeks out, it's not too early to fill out the form and get the ball rolling. All right, Ella says, I'm a nurse in Georgia. I need an MD and a lawyer for my IV hydration clinic. We also want to offer ketamine, opioid withdrawal. Are you able to help with this? We need oversight for counseling practice.
Yeah, so I know that for certain types of infusions like ketamine, I assume there may need to be a physician on site for actual supervision. If that's the case, it may be a little bit more challenging, but we certainly would be willing to find somebody, and probably can. We do have doctors in that state. My gut feeling says that if it's ketamine and things like that, probably would need to be a psychiatrist as well, or an anesthesiologist if it's just for the actual, just the oversight of the infusions. But we'd have to see. But it's definitely something we can do. Okay.
Nicole says, are you looking for any new physicians to join your team? What do you have?
We were always happy to have physicians join our team. We have a questionnaire on our website, just as we do for providers. We have one for physicians. So if a physician wants to join our database, hop on doctorsforproviders.com, fill it out, and we'll be happy to work with you when the opportunity arises.
Always looking for great talent. So.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what is the best vehicle to deliver information about a patient to the doctor, and how does it work for, let's say they're not on site? Do you send the doctor the charts once a month or something? Is that how it works?
That's something we want the providers to clearly, work out with the physicians, and everybody has different sort of preferences. Sometimes they will want access to the EMR, so they can just log into the EMR and be able to see what's going on. Sometimes they will use some sort of, protected other ways of communication, email that is HIPAA compliant, or other ways. So everybody's different how they want it done, and that's something that could be easily worked out between both parties.
Okay, and then is there a certain, did certain physicians require a certain type of EMR, or is that just it's
usually we found that physicians never press the person running the clinic on what EMR they want to use. Sometimes they'll ask the doctor, hey, do you like this one? Have you had experience with this one? But usually they leave it to the person running the practice to pick what EMR they want. So they're usually pretty flexible.
Okay. And so someone says, is the team used for obtaining a medical director through IV Hydration Mastermind? Yes, it is. We are collaborating with the Doctors for Providers. They're offering this amazing service for free for the nurses to get started in their business at a reasonable cost. So this is very, very exciting. This is a huge weight off of everybody's shoulders because, you know, a lot of nurses are fearful to start their business because they don't know if they can find a medical director. And then there's kind of like, how do I approach this? And then there's the whole element of like, I've got to train this physician to know how to be the medical director, and I'm not even sure what a medical director is supposed to be doing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why we prefer working with physicians who are knowledgeable about medical directorship. So most of the time we'll use somebody who's very knowledgeable. And if they're not, it's, you know, I think it's okay to sometimes, you know, you got to start somewhere, but we just have to make sure that they're open-minded and willing to be helpful. And it's okay. They may become an amazing at it as time goes on. So, we never exclude somebody just because they haven't done it before.
Right.
I mean, I think it's just so great. If I were a nurse, RN or whatnot, I mean, instead of having to work for the doctor, like you're having the doctor work for you. You're in charge of yourself. Get to set your own hours and take your own call whenever you want. So I think it's just so great. It's like
I think Dan, absolutely. I think both of us have entrepreneur sort of mindsets. We always have, and I think that really gives you the independence to do what you want. When you're your own boss, it's really freeing in many ways. So we can definitely understand that mindset of somebody who wants to start their own practice.
Awesome. This has been awesome. Guys, if you have some last questions here, we're going to start to wrap up. So put them in the box and I'll get the guys to answer it. But this isn't the end either, because if you are in need of a medical director, all you need to do is you can go to doctorsforproviders.com, or you can go to the nursepreneurs.com/medical-director. Fill out the simple form. There's no cost to this at this time, until the end of August. There's no, so get it started if you're 4 to 6 weeks out before starting your business. And then there is a fee that is paid for the collaborating physician that you work with. And it's going to be somewhere in the ballpark, it's going to be more than 700, but probably less than 2,000 a month. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's definitely fair to say. I think the vast majority of our contracts are under $2,000.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. If there's no more questions, Layla sent me an email, so I will check that. But thank you guys, everybody, for coming. This will be posted so that you can rewatch it. And if you have more questions, put them in the thread, and I will answer the best I can. I'll tag the guys if I can answer the question, or I'll get them to answer it for us. But thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Katie.
Yeah. Thanks for having us. Thanks, Nursepreneurs.